Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, by Jean Lee Latham. Chapter 14. 19 Guns. David and his crew all died of fever. Heartsick, Nat hurried to Mary's house. All the way there, his thoughts were in a jumble. What could he say to Mary? How could he comfort her? Maybe if I waited till after supper, he muttered, I could think of something to say. But he knew he was being a coward to tell himself that. He reached the house, tapped, and opened the door. Lois was there with Mary, helping Mary's little daughter read her New England primer. Mary saw Nat first. Nat! She came to meet him. Dear Nat! Her lips trembled and her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she leaned her forehead against his shoulder, hiding her face. If it hadn't been for you, Nat, I wouldn't have married David. I know, Nat said. Nat admitted miserably. He'd been thinking of that himself. Did Dr. Bentley tell you I wanted to see you? Yes, Mary. I came right away. I wanted to say thank you, Nat. If it hadn't been for you, I would have missed being the happiest woman in Salem. While David was here. She lifted her head. Her lips were steady now. She smiled slightly. Thank you, Nat. And now, will you do something for me? Anything I can. Sit down here and tell us all about your voyage. Everything. Just as David used to when he came home. 3 hours later, supper was over, the dishes washed, and Nat was still talking. Someone called, the door opened, and Elizabeth Boardman came in with her cousin, Mary Ingersoll, whom all the family called Polly. Elizabeth's violet eyes glowed. I heard you were here. Polly's level brown eyes danced with mischief. I think Elizabeth was just going to drop in to see Mary and pretend to be surprised when she saw you, but she was afraid I'd tell on her. Elizabeth blushed and laughed. Children, she said. Polly made a face. You're not so old. 16. And I'm almost. Elizabeth laughed with Polly. She said, Tell us all about everything, Nat. Nat was solemn. I couldn't possibly. It's taken me 3 hours to tell Mary and Lois, and I haven't got them off bourbon yet. Little girls shouldn't stay up that late. This time Polly made a face at him. When Father comes home, I stay up till all hours. Nat could imagine that. Polly's father was Captain Ingersoll, one of the most famous captains who sailed a Derby ship. He told them about bourbon and Captain Blanchard's Vive de Republique. At 9, he walked to the Boardman house with them, and then went to see Dr. Bentley. Dr. Bentley talked late, bringing Nat up to date on the news of nations. Nat listened hungrily. He remembered how Habit once said, When I get home from a voyage, I feel as though I had been asleep 6 months. 6 months. Affairs were in a miserable tangle, Dr. Bentley said. Things weren't settled with England yet. Americans were still fighting the Jay Treaty bitterly. English captains were still searching our vessels and seizing our sailors, and the trouble with France grew more serious every day. I doubt if you'll be sailing soon again, Nat. At least not until the trouble with France is settled. But a few days later, Mr. Derby called Nat and Captain Prince to his office to talk over another voyage. The ship is named the Astrea. He smiled slightly. I rather like that name. Nat thought of the earlier Astrea, on which Captain John Derby had brought the news of peace from Paris. He remembered how proud he'd been when his father said, Crowded sail he did, and came from Paris in 22 days. Mr. Derby seemed to be reading Nat's thoughts. The other Astrea made a record for herself. I intend that this Astrea shall set a record too. The first Salem ship ever to enter Manila Harbor. Manila, halfway around the world. Evidently, Nat decided. Mr. Derby wasn't too concerned about the trouble with France. Mr. Derby went on in his quiet way. The Astrea mounts cite 19 guns, Captain Prince. If any of your crew has ever shipped on a privateer or a letter of markship, they might be useful. Nat's scalp prickled. Captain Prince merely nodded. Any ports before Manila? Yes. He'll carry a mixed cargo to Lisbon and stop at Funchal in the Madeira Islands, then on to Manila. When Nat and Captain Prince left the office, Nat said, Manila. I wonder what language they talk there. The Spanish out of the Prince stared at Nat. Don't tell me you're going to learn another language. Why not, sir? Prince pursed his lips and shook his head. Carry on, Mr. Bowditch. A few days later, Nat was ready to start learning Spanish. He had a dictionary, a grammar, and a New Testament. He opened the New Testament to the first chapter of John. Again, he repeated the words in English. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He looked at the Spanish. En el principio era el verbo, y el verbo era con Dios, y el verbo era Dios. Nat smiled. Spanish, he decided, would be the easiest language of all to learn. He would figure out every word in the sentence without a bit of trouble. Toward the last of March, Mary said, Do you have to sail Friday, Nat? Nat teased her. You're not superstitious about Friday, are you? Saturday's your birthday. If you do have to sail Friday, I wish... Nat saw the idea back of Mary's eyes. Oh no, you don't tell anyone that Saturday is my birthday. Why not? I wouldn't care for a celebration on Shepherd. Why? What would they do? Oh, something jolly, like ducking me or pouring a few buckets of water on me. No celebrations, please. Mary promised she'd keep his birthday a dark secret. Nat kissed her and went down to the wharf to see how the loading of the Astrea was coming along. Mr. Collins was on board, in a foul humor. You and your teaching, he growled. What's wrong with my teaching? We've lost 4 of the men we were counting on, including Keeler. Nat grinned. Keeler was supposed to be a troublemaker, wasn't he? I'd think you'd be relieved. He was, Collins growled. But Keeler knew guns. Blast you and your teaching. 4 good men all signed up as second mates on smaller vessels. Good for them. Collins glared. What about us? We'll just have to replace them. Sure, just like that. But do you know who is going to replace Keeler? Lem Harvey. Nat whistled. He knew Lem Harvey, a huge fellow with hulking shoulders and a sullen, swarthy face. A troublemaker if ever anyone lived. Why sign him on? Because, Collins growled. He sailed on privateers before he was knee-high to a capstan. He knows guns. If you have trouble with the French, he'll be worth the rest of the crew put together. And if we don't have trouble with the French? Nat asked. We'll have trouble with Lem. Personally, I'd rather have trouble with the French. A boy came aboard with a letter for Nat. Dear Nat, good luck on your voyage. When the Astrea sails, I'm going to be on the captain's walk, watching you. Elizabeth. Early Friday morning, Nat strolled across the common toward the big white house and saw Elizabeth standing on the captain's walk. She waved and signaled that she'd come down. A few moments later, she came outside to meet him. You're shivering, Nat said. You're cold. I'm not cold, she whispered. I'm scared. Her violet eyes looked bigger than ever in her heart-shaped face. Nat, they have guns on the Astrea. Why? just so we won't have any trouble. If a French privateer sees us, we'll look so dangerous, the privateer will crowd sail and run. Elizabeth didn't smile. Nat, please take care of yourself. If anything... Suddenly, she stood on tiptoe, kissed him, wheeled, and fled into the house. Nat stared after her. He started to follow. He stopped. Nonsense, he told himself. She's just a child. Get on board your ship, Mr. Bowditch. He strode briskly toward the waterfront. Somehow, he didn't quite know how it happened. He found himself on Union Wharf instead of Derby, and had to pretend he was looking for someone. Once the Adhd had weighed anchor, though, he forgot about everything behind him. He even forgot about 16-year-olds who did unexpected things, such as kissing a man goodbye, for the wind was against them. If the Adhd managed to be out of Salem Harbor, every man on board was going to need 4 arms and 6 pairs of hands to handle sail. The men worked desperately to keep her far enough into the wind to clear Naugus Head, but they couldn't make it. They had to come to and anchor again. All day, Friday and Friday night, they stood their watches and slept with their ears cocked. And all day Saturday and all that night and all Sunday morning, they waited. It was late Sunday afternoon before they finally got under way. Again, they divided the men into watches. When Nat had his first choice, he heard himself say, "Lem Harvey," and then wondered why he did it. Was it because he felt responsible for Lem's being on the Adhd? When the watches were divided, Captain Prince stood on the quarterdeck and spoke to the crew. If anything, he sounded grimmer than he had sounded on the Henry. He added something to what he had said then. There are 2 things every man of you must learn, and learn fast. First, you need to recognize the colors of every nation. When you're on lookout and you sight a sail, you'll take it for granted it's an enemy until you know it's a friend. Second, you must learn to handle these guns like the crew of a man of war. Lem Harvey, I'm putting you in charge of training the crew on the guns. I want these men drilled until they can cast loose their guns, run them out, and fire. He snapped his fingers. Like that. Do you understand? Lem Harvey didn't smile, or straighten, or show any pleasure. He scowled, his heavy black brows coming together over his sullen eyes. Aye, sir, they'll learn. That was all he said aloud. But Nat saw his mouth finish the sentence. They'll learn, or wish they had. Day after day, Nat heard Lem roar his orders and bellow his abuse. Between spates of profanity, the directions were exact. Cast loose your guns! No, you thumb-fingered fool! Make that muzzle lashing fast to the eyeball! Level your guns! How many times do I have to tell you? Lash that bed to the bolts! Take out your tompions! You blasted fool! Don't stand there and hold it! Drop it! What do you think that lanyard's for? Run out your guns! You, look at those tackle falls! What sort of lubber's coil is that? In fakes, I told you, in fakes! Prime, get that powder horn out of the way! Serve you right if I let you stand there until it blew up in your face! Move! Point your guns! No! First with your side sights, and then with your upper sights! You there! Ready with that match! Fire! And the guns roared. Before the sound died and the smoke lifted, Lem was bellowing again. Sponge your guns! Where the... is that sponge? Ram it down! Ram it home! Twist it! You want to leave a spark in there to blow you to... Ready with that cartridge? Where are you going? Sleeping on your feet? Load! Get that wad in there, you fool! Ram it home! Ram it! Shot your guns! Day after day, Lem bullied and jeered and cursed the men, but they learned to handle the guns. They finally moved fast enough to please even Captain Prince, but Lem still bullied them. When the men weren't drilling on the guns, they were slaving in the rigging. Nat was glad for the crew when they sighted the coast of Portugal. They stood off and on all night. In the morning, a pilot came on board to take them up the Tagus River. They sailed through the mile-wide mouth of the river and then saw the Tagus spread into a great bay. On the north bank of the river, the city of Lisbon rose on the hills. Nat stared at the houses. He'd never seen anything like them, tile-roofed and painted every color of the rainbow. Mr. Collins drawled, "Well, Mr. Bowditch, did you learn Portuguese talk too, so you could be handy in port?" Nat said, "Blast! I didn't think of that. I've been learning Spanish for Manila." But when Nat and Captain Prince went on shore, they found the custom officials conducted all their business in French. Again, Captain Prince clapped his hand on Nat's shoulder and said, "We don't need an interpreter." Soon Nat was busy changing escudos to dollars and adding figures in his head before the other men could add them on paper. Between times, he went sightseeing in Lisbon. "I must remember all this," he thought, "to tell Elizabeth when He felt his cheeks get hot. To tell all of them, I mean. But it was Elizabeth's face and her sparkling eyes he could see when he thought of home. He grew rough sketches of things he wanted to remember. The tawny oxen that looked so fierce, with their 6-foot spread of horns, the amazing women of Portugal who carried everything on their heads, boxes, baskets, and huge flat trays of fish. He tried to sketch the streets of Lisbon, but he couldn't get the effect he wanted on flat paper. To tell her, them, he thought, that no matter where I wanted to go, it was always uphill from where I'd been. He could imagine how Elizabeth's eyes would sparkle. "When we get back," he said, and he stopped. Before they got back, the Adhd would have sailed halfway around the world. Lisbon might seem far from Salem now, but it was next door to home, compared to far off Manila. He found an old sailor who had doubled the Cape and been to India and through Sunda Strait to Manila. With the help of a map, gestures, Spanish, and figures, Nat managed to learn a lot. Things went quickly in Lisbon, but not so quickly enough to keep Lem from slipping ashore when he was on duty, getting into a fight, and landing in jail. He was put in the brig until the Adhd was ready to sail. The morning they were to weigh anchor, he was released. The storm howled in from the Atlantic, and they waited out miserable days and nights. Lem tried to slip ashore again, and sat out the rest of the storm in the brig. After a week, they managed to beat out of the Tagus into the Atlantic. Then they battled headwinds to Madeira. Lem was released from the brig again. They needed his weight on the halyards. At last, they anchored in Funchal Bay. The storm had ended. A moon rose, and they saw the whitewashed houses rising on steep hills, gleaming in the moonlight. When Captain Prince and Nat went ashore, the first man to greet them was Mr. Pintard, the American consul. He held them like long-lost brothers, asked news of home, invited them to dinner, all in one breath. Mrs. Pintard was all smiles, too, when they dined in the Pintard home. She was full of stories of the islands. "Mr. Bowditch," she said, "have you heard that delightful legend of how Mexico got its name?" "There were 2 lovers," Mr. Pintard smiled. "My dear, Mr. Bowditch is a mathematician, he'd hardly be interested in your legends." "A mathematician? Here's an interesting problem for you, Mr. Bowditch. 5 years ago, I inherited some money in Ireland." She named the amount. Mr. Pintard said, "Dear, wait until after dinner, and we'll let Mr. Bowditch write down." Nat said, "And what happened?" "The money was invested in Ireland at 8%, she told him. "After 3 years, the whole sum, interest and all, was sent to England. It was invested there at 8.5%. After 2 years, 2 years and 2 months, the whole sum was sent to me here. How much should I have received? Mr. Pintard said, After dinner, dear, you can write down the whole thing for him, and he can take it home and work it out. We don't want him to waste his evening over figures, do we? Nat laid down his knife and fork and sat staring at the flickering lights of the candles. After a little, he said, 843 pounds, 15 shillings, and 6 1/4 pence. Tell me about Machiko. Mrs. Pintard stared. Mrs. Pintard stared. Mr. Pintard said, What? Machiko, Nat repeated. I'd like to hear what got its name. Captain Prince grinned. 2 minutes by my watch. He won't have to waste the evening after all. That's right. But that's right, Mrs. Pintard gasped. To the last fraction. That's exactly how much I received. Of course, Nat told her. That's the beauty of mathematics. It's exact. Now, about Machiko. Mrs. Pintard was still staring at him, dumbfounded. You've no idea how handy he is in port, Captain Prince was amused. Mr. Pintard shook his head slowly. Then he said, I guess I'll have to tell you the legend. My wife is too dumbfounded to talk. About Machiko. It was this way. It seems there were two lovers, Robert Machim and Anna Darfet. Some sort of Romeo and Juliet mix-up between their families, I suppose. Anyhow, they were fleeing from England to France. Their ship was caught in a storm and driven clear to the Madeiras. The place they were driven ashore was named Machiko after them. I never heard whether they lived happily ever after or were wrecked. But that's the legend, Nat said. Thank you. I'll tell her about it when he felt his ears getting red. My sister, I mean. She's always interested to hear about everything. Mrs. Pintard was still dazed. To the last fraction of then, womanlike, she must have noticed Nat's flush. Her eyes danced. Mr. Bowditch, are you sure it's your sister? Are you trying to arrange a romance for my supercargo? Supercargo? Captain Prince asked. Nat laughed with them. He knew he might as well. A fine chance he'd have to make a girl fall in love with him. What was it Liza had said to him once? You mathematician. I wish you could at least pay compliments without arithmetic. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, by Jean Lee Latham. Chapter 15. Sail Ho! That night as their boat took Nat and Captain Prince across Funchal Bay to the Astrea, Nat was still thinking about the legend of Machiko. Maybe, he decided, before they weighed anchor, he'd write a letter to Elizabeth. There were several things he could tell her. About Lisbon, about the women who sold the fish, and about the legend of Machiko. Or perhaps he'd keep that to tell her when he saw her. Perhaps he'd tell her about that, and then they boarded the Astrea. At the first glimpse of Collins's face, Nat knew something was wrong. Even before Collins spoke, Nat guessed that Lem was in trouble again. Nat had guessed right. For the third time, Lem Harvey was in the brig. That's the end of it, Prince roared. Hereafter, someone else will drill the men at the guns. He strode below. Collins shook his head. Now we will have trouble with Lem. Oh, for a good rousing battle with a privateer, or better yet, a running fight all the way to the Cape. That would keep Lem out of trouble. What's the matter with Lem, anyhow? Nat asked. Collins shrugged. Lem was just born that way. Born to fight. When he can't fight in a good cause, he just fights anyhow. There's no way to stop him. I could spread eagle him, give him 3 dozen lashes. He'd just swagger about his work with his back running blood. Nat's stomach churned. There ought to be some other way. Collins raked him with a disgusted glance. There isn't. Lem Harvey's born to trouble. He did pretty well while he was drilling the men. That let him work off part of his meanness. Now, heaven help us. The end of May, they stood out from Madeira and headed south. Tom Owens took over drilling the men. Lem glowered and muttered under his breath. His sullenness seemed to hang over the whole crew. Nothing a man could put his finger on. But everything took twice as long to do as it should. It was almost a relief one day when a sudden squall hit them and had the men fighting like demons to reef sails before the mast snapped. Something to struggle against seemed to clear the air. Was there no other way? Nat wondered. To keep the crew in a better frame of mind? That evening, after the storm, Nat went to the forecastle. The men hadn't dried out yet from the squall. Oilskins and jerseys hung everywhere. The stench of sweat and tar slapped Nat in the face as he entered the forecastle. A man who was talking stopped in mid-sentence. Eyes turned a sullen stare toward Nat. Nat said, "Is there any man here who'd like to be the master of a ship someday? Who'd like to be master of a ship someday?" From his mighty 6'3", Lem Harvey looked down at Nat. When he spoke, his words were respectful, but there was the undercurrent of a sneer in his voice. "Who wouldn't, sir? But what chance have we got, sir?" "The same chance I had," Nat barked. "In case you want to know, I stopped school when I was 10. I've been sailing by Ash Breeze ever since. What I've learned, I've picked up here and there in my spare time. Now, between here and Manila, we're going to have some spare time. Does anyone want to learn some navigation?" Tom Owens reached a calloused hand and almost broke Nat's fingers with his grip. "We're with you," he said. "If you can get any navigation in our heads. Good for you, sir." He looked around him. "And if any man don't learn what he can learn, Lem Harvey stirred. Tom Owens stopped, then went on lamely. He ought to be ashamed of himself." Lem glowered. "You talking to me?" Tom hesitated. He was a big fellow, but Lem towered over him. Tom mustered a grin. "I'm just talking for myself, Lem. Lem stepped closer and stood nose to nose with Tom. "Just talking for yourself, eh? See that you remember that," Nat said. "We'll begin tomorrow. Good night." He returned to the deck and walked slowly aft. What had he done? Made more trouble? Well, whatever happened, he had started it, and he'd have to see it through. Next day at four bells of the dog watch, when the men gathered, Lem was not there. Nat thought to himself, maybe he'll come around. He began, "Celestial navigation, or sailing by the sky, is what we'll talk about first. All of you know how, when we're close to shore, we figure our position by landmarks. And you know how, when we're out of sight of land, we figure our position by, well, we might call them sky marks. The stars, the sun, the moon." After a little, the men stirred restlessly. Nat felt someone behind him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lem Harvey glowering. Nat went on talking, trying to make a far-off star seem more important than Lem Harvey's nearby glare. The weeks passed. Lem still glowered and muttered, but he was not affecting the crew with this mood now. They were standing a little straighter and working a little more smartly. It did things to a man, Nat thought, to find out he had a brain. Near the end of July, the Adhd reached the Cape. Johnny shivered. "Brr, mighty funny weather for July," Nat said. "It's winter at the Cape. "In July, sir?" The weather's upside down, Nat told him. And with a cannonball and a lantern, he showed Johnny how the earth goes around the sun. You see, the axis of the earth, from the north to the south pole, leans on a slant like that. So as the earth goes around the sun, first the sun shines straight down this part, and then on that. Along about the end of June, the sun is shining straight down up here, as far north as it ever does. So, north of the equator, where we live, it's the beginning of summer, but down here, south of the equator, it's the beginning of winter. Johnny shivered again. I hope it won't be this cold all the way to Manila. It won't, Nat promised him. After we double the Cape, we'll be sailing toward the equator again. Again, the passage around the Cape of Good Hope meant one long struggle against headwinds. For 3 days and nights, the watches seemed endless, and the men turned in all standing. They left the storm behind and sailed north of the Indian Ocean. I'm glad that's over, Johnny muttered. Then, a bit glumly, he added, but there's always something. Wonder what next? The what next was a warning cry from the lookout. Nat was on watch when it came. Sail ho! Off the larboard bow. Lem did not wait for a command. He dashed forward, bellowing, all hands on deck and man the guns! Before the strange ship was close enough for the lookout to see her colors, the guns were cast loose and ready for action. But that was not fast enough for Lem. He roared, get those matches lit! And soon men stood ready, blowing on the end of the long, slow-burning rope to keep it lighted. Captain Prince was on the quarterdeck with his spyglass. Nat hailed the lookout. What colors is she flying? The lookout had never seen the colors before. An ensign with the Union Jack and red and white stripes. Some country ruled by England, Nat said. Prince's laugh was a short bark. It's the flag of the East India Company, Mr. Bowditch. Nat felt his face get hot. Oh, I thought it was a country. Prince shrugged. You weren't so far wrong at that. There was many a nation without half as much power as the East India Company. They've held their charter for almost 200 years. When Queen Elizabeth gave it to them, she gave them enough power to hold their own against the Dutch. They've still got that power. They can take over land, wage war, and make peace. They've got their own ships, own uniforms, own flags. They've got a bigger and better trained army than we ever had. When England got into this war with France, do you know what the East India Company did? They turned over a dozen frigates, well armed and fully manned. A dozen frigates. The ship of the East India Company did not seem interested in the Astrea. She held to her course and disappeared. Lem bellowed, Secure your guns! He sounded disgusted. At the sound of Lem's voice, Captain Prince stared toward him. For the first time, Nat remembered that Lem wasn't supposed to have charge of the guns. He saw Lem's jaws stiffen, his face grow sullen. Nat spoke quickly. Captain Prince, I ordered Lem to handle the guns. He was on my watch, and Captain Prince said, I see. Send him aft. Lem Harvey came. Prince eyed him up and down. At last he spoke. How did your men do? Were they fast enough? Lem's head jerked up. He grinned. They were terrible, sir. Thumb-fingered fools, the lot of them. Captain Prince said, Mr. Collins, have the men drilled twice a day until further orders. Have Lem and Tom divide the detail. A smile twitched Collins' face. Aye, aye, sir. That night, Nat was on deck after his watch, standing at the rail, watching the sky. Mr. Bowditch, sir? A voice rumbled softly. Yes, Lem. Begging your pardon, sir, but I didn't hear you order me to handle the guns this morning. Didn't you? I guess you were making so much noise yourself that you couldn't hear anything. Aye, aye, sir. Lem shoveled his feet. Mr. Bowditch, sir? Yes, Lem. I, I'm dumb. About book learning, I mean. Do you think you could teach me anything without bawling me out? Yes, but I couldn't teach you much as long as you bawled yourself out. Huh, sir? I mean, suppose you made a little mistake or didn't understand something right away. If you wasted my time cursing and yelling, I can't get that. What's the use? Then I couldn't teach you. But, for a long time, Lem was silent. Then he chuckled. Mr. Bowditch, sir, heaven help you, but you've got yourself a job. They shook hands on it. Now, when Nat taught the rest of the crew, Lem stood listening. Whenever Nat and Lem had a spare minute, he taught Lem alone, so that he could catch up with the others. At first, it was slow work. In spite of everything, Lem's anger would blaze in himself, and he would storm in rage. Time and again, Nat said, "You're wasting time, Lem." Finally, Lem settled down, and then he learned so fast that he surprised even Nat. The Adhd crowded sail now, moving north and east through pleasant weather. Then, so suddenly that it seemed to come between one watch and the next, the steamy heat of the tropics descended. The rigging went slack, tar melted and dripped. The wind died to fitful breezes. Men pumped endless buckets of water and carried them aloft to douse the sails so they would catch what little breeze blew. Between his watches, Nat worked over his notes to figure out how to teach the men. One night, near eight bells of the first watch, Johnny came to Nat's cabin, his teeth chattering with fright. Mr. Bowditch, sir, come quick. There's something wrong with the water. We're sailing into something. Nat hurried topside. All hands were on deck, standing in silent huddles. Nat went forward to the bow where Collins and Lem were staring into the water. Johnny's teeth were still chattering. The ocean's on fire. It'll burn us up. It was enough to frighten anyone, Nat admitted to himself. Where the bow of the Adhd cut the water, waves of white fire curled back. Captain Prince joined them forward. He stared at the water, too, and ordered a bucket load. Lem bent on a rope, lowered a bucket, and pulled. The bucket rose from the water. Rope, bale, and sides dripping white fire. Lem hesitated, swallowed hard, and brought the bucket up. Captain Prince held a lantern close. The glow disappeared. He ordered the lantern covered, and once more the fire glowed. They leaned close to study the water. In the darkness, they could see millions of tiny glowing specks dashing about in the water. Phosphorescence, he said. He stood by the bow a moment, staring down at the curl of white fire. What's your course, Mr. Collins? Due east, sir. Very good. He turned and strode below. Lem dumped the water overboard. A cascade of white fire streamed down. 8 bells came. The larboard watch lay below. The men of the starboard watch hesitated, shuffled their feet, then went to their posts. Lem stalled around the longest. He cleared his throat. Mr. Bowditch, sir? What did the captain mean? I mean, if you could think of something for me to tell the others. Some of them are scared, sir. You've seen fireflies, haven't you, Lem? Lightning bugs? Sure, Mr. Bowditch. These must be tiny sea animals that glow in the dark, like fireflies. Lem released his breath in a long sigh. Oh, sure, like fireflies. I'll tell them, sir. Some of the poor fools are scared. Towards 6 bells of Nat's watch, the water cleared. Lem swaggered aft. Oh, God, ain't it? Too bad, sir. It was kind of pretty. Nat's watch ended. He was below, and just dropping off to sleep when he heard the cry, "Land ho!" The lookout must have sighted Java ahead. Nat rolled over and went to sleep. If the stories they had heard in Lisbon were true, they would all need rest before they faced the days ahead of them. They must beat their way between Java and Sumatra, fighting against the swift current of Sunda Strait. The next day they stood off Java Head, waiting for a wind to favor them. Captain Prince was on deck, staring east towards Sunda Strait. Johnny said, "Mr. Bowditch, sir, how do you sail against the current like that? Like they say it is in Sunda Strait?" "A simple matter of mathematics, Johnny. If the current against you is flowing at, say, 10 knots an hour, you have to be making at least 11 knots to move against it." Captain Prince humphed. "A problem in navigation, Mr. Bowditch, and not so simple. We've got to tack off shore where the wind can reach us. We'll be feeling our way without a lead, and we'll be fighting an uphill sea every mile of Sunda Strait." The wind veered, freshened, and grew briskly. With every sail spread and bellying taut, the Astrea moved sluggishly against the current. Nat looked aloft into the rigging, and found himself clenching his fists and holding his breath, trying to will more speed into his ship. The wind slackened. The sails lost their taut curves. The Astrea shuddered, stood still, and then began to swing sideways in the current, pouring like a mighty river through the strait. Nat jerked to attention and snapped orders. Men dropped the anchors. Hour after hour crawled by, and the waters clawed at the Astrea, trying to drive her back. The sun rose to its zenith and poured down merciless heat. Afternoon came. Then the sudden night of the tropics swallowed them in blackness. But night brought little relief from the heat. Men slumped to the deck and tried to snatch sleep. At 4 bells of the first watch, the wind freshened. Men leaped to the capstan and heaved the anchor. Slowly, the Astrea crawled forward, stopped again, and began to swing sideways. 1 day, 2 days, 3. They fought to make headway. Sometimes it seemed the huge dripping anchors barely broke water before the wind died again. The 4th day, when the Astrea lay at anchor, her sails limp, another ship passed them, moving steadily against the current. Johnny was so angry he almost wept. "Look at that, sir! Look! What's the matter with us? How can that one pass us? "She's in ballast and riding high," Nat explained, wearily. "Her topsails and royals are catching a breeze that's too high for us." After 1 week, the men were hollow-eyed, staggering with weariness. A smart breeze rose abaft the beam. They were almost too tired to cheer, but not too tired to get the Astrea underway in jig time. The wind increased. With every sail filled, the Astrea heeled over and moved smartly. Johnny cheered, "Hooray! This time we made it." The wind veered sharply and threatened to drive them ashore. They fought to bring the Astrea far enough to the wind to keep her from going aground. The wind died again. They anchored. Lem Harvey glared down at Johnny. "When we're moving again, if we ever are, you open your mouth and I'll keel-haul you." Then he grinned. More and more often, Lem topped off a roar with a grin. "Leastwise, I'll have a notion to." Thanks for listening. Please be sure to like and subscribe.